Chairman, I can confirm the live stream is up and running for the second part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, meeting producer Louise, and welcome back. Thank you to all those of you who stuck it out for this morning's marathon session, and here we are back ready to face the next items on our agenda. So that will begin with item agenda number 9.1, and that is the capital programme update. So just to repeat, that is item agenda number 9.1, the capital programme update. I'm going to ask Councillor Painter to move this and Councillor German to second the recommendation. You'll find it, councillors, on page 145 of your agenda pack. So, Councillor Painter, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This report provides an overview of the Cabinet recommendations to uplift the Council's capital programme since it was previously approved by full Council. It combines the recent decisions from Cabinet on the 16th of December 2020 and seeks the formal approval from Council for the overall increase to the programme for the funding of those projects. The capital programme is a long-term programme of projects delivering on significant improvements, facilitating and enabling key projects for the Council and the residents of Cornwall. The latest overall programme includes major planned expenditure of £250 million on highways improvements and transport, £440 million on new and improved housing projects, £230 million on schemes which support economic growth and jobs. The total capital programme now stands at almost £1.2 billion over 4 years. The report's recommendation is that the capital programme is uplifted by an amount for new schemes and additional funding that has been recommended by Cabinet for inclusion since the capital programme was last approved by this Council on the 24th of November 2020. So this includes £6.59 million for the Council's local contribution towards the A39 Atlantic Highway Camelford Bypass scheme, supporting the outline business case to be submitted to the Department for Transport, seeking more than £41 million of government funding as a result. Changes to the capital programme as part of the Council's performance report quarter 2, 2020 to 21, including £5.1 million of additional funding from the Department of Transport for highways maintenance, £2.9 million of ERDF funding for 150 new electric vehicle charging points across Cornwall, and £1.3 million from the government's Get Building Fund for the whole house retrofit of Cornwall Council owned social homes to reduce carbon emissions. £6.7 million is also included for a technical accounting adjustment to reflect the funding of the Housing Development Programme expenditure by the Council before the transfer of the assets to Treveth. The gross costs are required to be recognised in the capital programme, but will be funded through the capital receipt from Treveth LLP upon the transfer of the asset. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, you are muted.
Thank you, Councillor Painter. Okay, then before I bring in Councillor Jim, I'm just going to ask all councillors to switch off their cameras, please. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor German, over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Happy to second. As colleagues will be able to see on the table on page 149, 5.8 million here on tackling climate change. So happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor German. So I'm going to invite some questions, and please, councillors, please refrain from putting comments in the chat box. It makes it really clogged up and I can't see who is, makes it harder for me to see who's asking questions. So I am going to go to Councillor Desmond, please. Councillor Desmond, if I could call you in.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions on the capital programme on page 149. One concerns the A39 Atlantic Highway, and I've written to Councillor Jeff Brown about this, and he's kindly offered to reply to my query, and it concerns the definition of what we mean by an outline business case, because my understanding was that the 6.5 million in the capital programme was actually for implementation and not for any more business cases. Back in 2019, Cornwall had reported that they had completed the business case, and so some clarification on that would be appreciated. The second concerns the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. What I'm concerned about there is why have we got 2.9 million in the capital fund when this is EDRF funding and not the 0.725 match funding from the council? And supplementary questions to that is, who is the council using for the charge points, and how many have been installed so far, or at least planned to be installed this year?
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. Apologies, Councillor Burden, I missed you. I couldn't see you in amongst all those comments that were being popped into the chat box, but I'm going to bring you in now, please. Councillor Burden.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. You're very generous. It's for Councillor Painter. I'm a bit concerned about how we're going to get this money to complete the scheme. Back in the 1990s, in the olden days, before many of you were born, North Cornwall District Council went a long way to get this bypass planned, etc. And I mean, nobody can disagree that Camelford does not need something. I mean, to see a large Arctic go through Camelford is horrendous. But is there a way of trunking the road again? It was detrunked in 2002 when Cornwall County Council agreed to it. But I mean, it thought it was a positive, but in actual fact, it's turned out to be a negative. And I just wonder, you know, is there any chance of getting the money? And the route was all agreed, and the costs then, which were rather small at the time, were all agreed, and then it was detrunked, and then we didn't get the money from government. So I just wonder how you see the way forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Rich, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I sort of second echo what Councillor Burton has just said. He's quite right. It was a trunk road, and it was maintained by Highways Agency, as it was called at the time. There's so many advantages for it to be retrunked again. It would obviously mean that the cost of maintaining the road wouldn't fall on the council, and it would be a priority. That route, you know, it would complement the A30 and the A38. Yeah, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Something else. I'm really sorry, I'm completely forgotten. Yeah.
Stage fright.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine. Councillors, is there anybody else who has a question, please? I'm having a look in the chat box and I can't see anybody. I'm going to give you a couple of... Oh, Councillor Dyer, sorry, I didn't see you, Councillor Dyer. You had your hand up, I believe. Sorry, I didn't see you up there. Councillor Dyer, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you, ma'am. My worries are twofold, and perhaps some answers that the planners could give would be helpful. The solution to drainage problems with the Langarth development that nobody really wants to talk about is a series of ponds or catchment areas. But my worry, number one, is that when the land is so wet, as it has been last winter and is currently this winter, and those ponds are full, where does the water go? And it goes, of course, I can answer that, into the River Kenwyn, and will help put the pressure on the New Mills Dam. And if they raise the height of the dam, it will flood out properties upstream. And if they don't raise the height of the dam, it will flood out Truro. And worry number two, we had a meeting just recently about the new dual carriageway A30 from Carland to Chiverton, and that is a brand new road running along, not completely parallel with, but almost parallel with the current A30. And so this is a 4-lane traffic movement that will also drain into the Kenwyn and further up towards Carland, the Allen valleys. And my worry is both the River Allen and the River Kenwyn draining to Truro. So I realise I'm over time, and I thank you for your tolerance, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Very apt interventions. I'm going to come back to Councillor Rich. You've remembered it was the government's major road network.
Yes. Sorry, Madam Chair. Apologies to members for that. I think about a year ago, the government announced this. They were going to basically upgrade certain roads around the UK, and it was called, I think it's called the Major Road Networks. And the A39 was on the map. And yeah, as Councillor Bowden says, it was a trunk road. It was trunked from Barnstaple to Indian Queens, where it connects to the A30. It wasn't trunked all the way down to Falmouth or beyond Barnstaple into Devon. It was just that one bit. But I think this major road network scheme, I think it was suggesting on the map that a lot more of it would be kind of upgraded. I don't think it was saying it was going to be trunked again, but it would certainly get some kind of elevated status. So it might be worth Councillor Brown chasing that up with government the next time he has conversations with his colleagues in the Highways Department or the DEFRA or whoever it is that they speak to. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. I don't think I can see any other questions, so I'm going to come back to Councillor Painter to respond and to sum up, please. Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I will pick up those questions. Thank you, councillors, for those. So yeah, the Camelford bypass, as has been said, has been on the cards for many years, and different routes have been discussed. I think the difference is now that funding has been provisionally allocated from government, a £41 million scheme for the proposed route. We have, as with many other schemes, government require local contributions to see them happen. So that's what this amount of money is for. I think the details, as far as I'm sure Councillor Brown will come back to Councillor Desmond about the details of that of those figures. With the EV charging, just on Councillor Desmond's second question, the EV charging, yes, that's leftover European funding money that's come in. The capital programme does include all money for the projects, not just the council's money. So if it comes in from elsewhere, that is added in, and the overall 1.2 billion pot is made up of government funding as well as external sources to go into the capital programme. Councillor Burden, I think you make the point about Camelford and what's changed. Well, I think what has changed is the scheme has been allocated funding provisionally to move forward, so that's why it's on the agenda today. I think the de-trunking of the A39 happened quite a number of years ago, which at the time was what we did have benefits for the council at that time, but clearly I'm sure again Councillor Brown will be able to give more details about that and how that happens, and then I'll ensure that Adam Birchall gets back to Councillor Dyer about drainage at Langarth. I don't have answers to those questions right now, but I'm sure Councillor Adam Birchall, one of our officers, would be able to respond to that and make sure that those queries are taken up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Painter, and I'll make sure, Councillor Dyer, that Adam Birchall does respond to that query of yours. At the same time, I see that Councillor Jeff Brown in the chat box has said that he would be happy to give an update if helpful. If you could give just a very brief update verbally, Jeff, that would be helpful if you could come in.
Yes, by all means, and thank you, Chairman. I'll circulate the detailed response to Councillor Phil Desmond so that all members can see that. But in summary, in the case of the A39 Atlantic Highway, the Corserve annual report was correct in referring to the delivery of the business case for this scheme as one of Cormac's achievements in 1920. The business case was submitted to the Department of Transport in July 2019 and resulted in £540,000 being awarded by the government to the council to progress the development of the scheme. However, it was the strategic outline business case required for stage 2 that was then submitted to the Department of Transport and not the outline business case, which is referred to in the annual report. So there isn't an error in actually the description of the wording. But effectively, we're now in the process of doing the full business case, at which point, once it's submitted, we should hopefully get approval from the government to use the funding to deliver it. It is the only major road network scheme that Cornwall put forward through the Strategic Transport Board for submission to the Department for Transport, and was successfully approved by the Department for Transport. In terms of the charging points, we're looking at over 100 charging points and work in progress at the moment on exactly where we're going to place those. And in terms of the water runoff from the roads, the water runoff, as Councillor Dyer knows from the meeting that he attended the other day, is to be captured in attenuation ponds or tanks, and that will actually filter the water and release it slowly into the river, thereby minimising the risk of any flooding.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. That was very helpful. I see Councillor May has indicated she's raised her hand. Councillor May, can I bring you in? Oh no, gone down again.
No, Madam Chairman, it's fine.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. So then I'm going to bring in the monitoring officer to go to the vote, please. Mel?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And just to say to members, I understand there's issue with my line. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. I think it's because we're flicking between different screens. So I will try and go slow, but for those of you who have known me, going slow isn't generally what I like to do. So members, if you can vote for me for, against or abstain, and this is on item 9.1 of the agenda, which is capital programme update. So starting, if I may, with Alvey.
Martin Alvey, 4.
Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, 4.
Bond.
Councillor Barnes,
Bastin.
Councillor John Bastin, 4.
Councillor Batters. I'll come back to Councillor Batters. Councillor Biggs.
Biggs, 4.
Bisco.
Bisco, 4.
Jeff Brown.
Jeff Brown, 4.
Malcolm Brown.
4.
Bull.
Jackie Bull, 4.
Gooden.
Neil Brown, 4.
Buscombe.
Richard Buscombe, 4.
Believe Councillor Callan has left the meeting. Chopak.
Vicky Chopak, 4.
Believe Councillor Code has left the meeting. Cole. Councillor Cole, are you able to confirm your vote? Come back to Councillor Cole. Councillor Collins.
Jeff Collins, 4.
Quaker, I believe, has not returned to the meeting. Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Dorr.
4.
Desmond. Councillor Desmond.
Thank you. Yes, 4.
Dolphin.
Dolphy, 4.
Duffin.
Joyce Duffin, 4.
Welly. Councillor Dwelly. I'll come back to Councillor Dwelly. Dyer.
John Dyer, 4.
Eathorne Gibbons.
Mike Eathorne Gibbons, 4.
Eddie.
Martin Eddy, 4.
Edgerton.
Bob Edgerton, abstain.
Ecclesmith.
David Egan-Smith, 4.
Ellenbrook.
Barbara Ellenbrook, 4.
Elliott.
Simon Elliott, 4.
Evans. Councillor Evans. Councillor Evans. Fairman.
Fairman, 4.
Peter.
Fitter, 4.
Ashman.
Jim Flashman, 4.
Fong.
Mario Fong, 4.
Foot.
Councillor Foot, 4.
Osa.
Mark Formosa, 4.
Frank.
Hilary Frank, 4.
French.
French, 4.
Frost.
Frost, 4.
Oh, thank you. Gammon. Councillor Gammon. Come back to Councillor Gammon. Councillor German.
Thank you. Julian German, 4.
Giles.
Councillor Giles, 4.
Councillor Greenslade, I believe, has left the meeting. Harding.
Roger Harding, 4.
Harris.
David Harris, 4.
Harvey. Councillor Harvey. I'll come back to Councillor Harvey. Hawkin.
Sally Hawkins, 4.
Hawkins.
Hawkins, 4.
Third.
John Hurd, 4.
Lead Councillor Hayward has left the meeting. Councillor Holly.
Holly is 4.
Lead Councillor James has left the meeting. Councillor Jenkin.
Councillor Jenkin, 4.
Jewel.
Councillor Jewell, 4.
Jordan.
4.
Marek. I believe he may have left the meeting. Keelan.
John Keeling, 4.
Joanna Kenny, 4.
Kirkham.
4.
Knightley.
4.
LeBroy.
LeBroy, 4.
Lennox Boyd.
Sheila Lennox Boyd, 4.
Long. Councillor Long. Got a feeling Councillor Long might have left the meeting. Councillor Luke.
Councillor Luke at 4.
John Martin.
John Martin, 4.
Massey.
Oh, Councillor Massey, 4.
May.
4.
McCarthy.
Matthew McCarthy, 4.
McKenna. Councillor McKenna, are you able to confirm your vote? I'll come back to Councillor McKenna. McLenning.
4. Councillor McLennan.
Andrew Mitchell.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell, 4.
Pete Mitchell.
Councillor Pete Mitchell, 4.
Monk. Councillor Monk, thank you. Moorcroft.
4, ma'am.
Mould.
Carol Mould, 4.
Musto.
James Musto, 4.
Nicholas.
Councillor Sue Nicholas, 4.
Nolan.
Rob Nolan, 4.
Olivier.
4.
Adam Parsons. Adrian Parsons, apologies. I'll come back to Adrian Parsons. David Parsons.
4. David Parsons, 4.
Thank you. Jane Pascoe.
Jane Pascoe, 4.
Lionel Pascoe. I'll come back to Lionel Pascoe. Painter.
Adam Painter, 4.
Is
Richard Pears, 4.
Pollard.
John Pollard, 4.
Pugh.
Richard Pugh, 4.
Rand. Councillor Rand.
Oh, Julian Rand, 4.
Thank you. Rich.
Like Rich, 4.
Robinson.
Richard Robinson, 4.
Rogerson.
Pat Rogerson and my roofers, 4. Sorry about the noise.
No problem, thanks for that. Rotchell.
Councillor Rob Rothschild, enthusiastically 4.
Rouse.
John Rouse 4.
Rule.
Carolyn Rule 4.
Rushworth.
4.
Thornby.
Councillor David Thornby 4.
No.
Saunders.
Councillor Sally Ann Saunders 4.
Councillor Seaver.
Councillor Seaver 4.
Thank you. Simmons.
Councillor Simmons 4.
Taylor.
Councillor Linda Taylor 4.
Ian Thomas.
Ian Thomas 4.
John Thomas. Councillor John Thomas.
John Thomas has left the meeting, monitoring officer.
Thank you very much. Mike Thomas.
Councillor Mike Thomas 4.
Toms.
Councillor Toms 4.
Towell.
Councillor Tow 4.
Ja. Councillor Tudor.
Councillor Tudor has also left the meeting, monitoring officer.
Thank you. Ver.
Councillor Ver 4.
Thank you. Wallace. Councillor Wallace left the meeting. Yeah. Peter Williams.
Councillor Peter Williams 4.
Wills.
Thank you, Councillor Wills 4.
Wood.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. So final call then for the outstanding voters. So I've got Councillor Batters.
Yes, Chris Ballard's apology delivery at the door 4.
Thank you. Councillor Cole. No vote for Councillor Cole.
Councillor Cole has left the meeting temporarily and should be back later.
Thank you, Democratic Service Officer. Councillor Dwelly. No. Councillor Evans. No. Councillor Gammon.
Hello, sorry, I have to abstain. I got frozen. So I didn't hear any of what went on. I've just had to leave and rejoin. Sorry.
Councillor Gammon. Councillor Harvey. Councillor McKenna. Adrian Parsons. And Lionel Pascoe. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the vote on this item. If I can ask members, if they are leaving the meeting, if they could please let me know through the chat box, I'd be greatly appreciated. So we'll confirm the outcome of that vote in a few seconds.
Chairman, I can confirm that vote was carried 92 votes for and 3 abstentions with nobody voting against.
Lovely. Thank you everyone. So we're going to move swiftly on to the next item on the agenda, which is our agenda item number 10.1. That's 10.1, and that is composition and terms of reference of the Standards Committee. So I'm going to ask Councillor Pollard, who has magically appeared on my screen, to move this, and Councillor Eddy to second the recommendation. You'll find it, councillors, set out on page 151 of your pack. After it has been moved and seconded, I will invite the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Standards Committee to come in just to give a quick brief comment. But first of all, over to you, Councillor Pollard.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I realise I'm pushing my luck, but can I just ask Mel to consider whether we can take both recommendations together, as it's a very long vote in each case, but I suspect that'll be a no, but I thought I'd ask. Anyway, on the recommendations concerning the Standards Committee are on page 151. And can I just assure colleagues that these recommendations have come through the Standards Board itself, and I'm very grateful to Paul Wills and his committee for their work in that way. You will note the recommendation is that the committee remains the same size in the future council, but the background to this is that in 2019 the Parliamentary Committee on Standards in Public Life published a report on ethical standards in local government. It made 29 recommendations. Some of those have been adopted, but others require statutory changes to be made. So there will be a further review of the Standards Board in the future, so this item will come back to a future council. However, the recommendations are very straightforward. They're fully supported by the Standards Board itself, and I note in the report that the Standards Board is and is complimented on its work from a national level, so well done to them, and I'm very happy to propose the recommendations.
Indeed, thank you, Councillor Pollard. Councillor Eddy next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd be very happy to second Councillor Pollard's proposal that we take all the recommendations together, as long as we don't have to vote on it. But I'm happy to second this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
I hear you with the voting. I'm going to bring the monitoring officer. I suspect it's going to be a no, but Mel, could I bring you in to see whether we can roll them into one?
Yeah, so this is generally, Chairman, one of those moments where the Constitution doesn't help me. So unfortunately, we do need to take them as separate recommendations and separate votes, as they're separate items on their agenda, as much as I wish that we could roll them into one to save my vocal cords for this afternoon.
Indeed. At least you're getting lots of practice at pronouncing our surnames now. So I'm now going to invite the Chairman of the Standards Committee, Councillor Wills, to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you very much to the Chairman of the Constitution and Governance Committee, Councillor Pollard, for your very kind words. Yes, the work of the Standards Committee obviously does continue. There will be new legislation which is being brought forward to Parliament hopefully in the not too distant future, which will mean that we may go back to hearings for very serious offences in breaches of the Code of Conduct. That's why it's felt so important to keep the size of the committee as it is at the moment. Of course, that's always constantly under review. The new model code of conduct, a working party has been working on that under the Vice Chair, so I will let Loveday explain all that to you. That's coming to the Standards Committee at a special meeting in March, and then will come to full council. The work of the Standards Committee is an important role within the council. Of course, we all have a duty to abide by the code of conduct in our public lives to ensure that we maintain the highest standards. And I thank the majority, the overwhelming majority of councillors within this council who do that, and the overwhelming majority at parish and town level as well, who maintain the highest standards in public life. They are a credit to what they do, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Here, I fully agree with you, Councillor Wills. Councillor Jenkins, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to endorse what the Chairman has said. The Standards Committee does work very well at the moment, and really this is codifying some of the things that the Standards Committee are already doing and making sure that they're being done in the right way. There will be a further piece of work, which is the review of the Code of Conduct, which will be coming to the next council meeting, but that's just finished going out for consultation, so it's not ready to come to this. But if I'd ask members to support this and support the work of the Standards Committee, an awful lot of work done by independent and lay people who come along and give their time in order to ensure that we have one of the best codes of conduct and one of the best functioning standards regime in the whole of Britain, I believe. And as was said before, it's been held up as high standard, and a lot of the Committee of Standards in Public Life recommendations are essentially what we're doing already. So Cornwall can hold its head high in terms of the standards regime. Thank you.
Indeed, and again I echo what you say, the contribution by the lay members and the independent members of the Standards Committee is also, they give their time, their expertise, and it's very excellent contributions to the extent that our Standards Committee is recognised nationally as one of the leading standards committees in the country. So I'm going to invite Councillor Biscoe has a question. I see that Councillor Barnes has put a question in the chat box about can we vote using the raised hand system instead. Mel, I'm very much minded to adopt this. So once Councillor Biscoe has asked his question, I'm going to bring you in to comment on that, please. Councillor Biscoe.
Yeah, just thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask on the third part of the recommendation, it says to exercise the power to make payments or otherwise make settlements. Are there no limits up to figures on that, or is it, how will that be regulated?
Good question. I cannot see councillors either. Is there anybody else who has a question? I'm presuming that Loveday wants to respond to that, so I'm going to bring Loveday in to respond to that first, Mel, sorry. Loveday, Councillor Jenkins.
I'm sure Mel can respond better than me, but essentially it's the local government social care ombudsman who set the amounts. So I'll pass it over to Mel to respond in more detail.
Thank you, Mel.
That was exactly what I was going to say, Councillor Jenkins, that is set by the local government social care ombudsman. I don't have the figure to hand right now, but happily to provide that to Councillor Biscoe should he want to see it.
Okay, and so Councillor Barter suggested perhaps we could use the raised hand system instead. Councillors, I'm minded to take that on, considering that we're running well over time. And considering how long it takes for individual roll call. If you objected to that suggestion, could you put your hand up and raise your hand if you object to going to the raised hand system? It's kind of a bit, a bit awkward to say raise your hands if you object to doing something using raise your hands, but that's what I'm asking you to do. Councillor John Martin. Could I bring you in, please? You object to using the raised hands to vote on this agenda item.
Thank you. I only object in procedure terms whether we have allow a name vote or not.
So you would like a named vote? Sorry, is that what I was hearing?
No, not necessarily. I'm just wondering if we proceed, whether there is going to be a name vote.
Okay, Mel, could I bring you in, please?
Yes, certainly. So just to be clear, you might remember back to our days when we were sat in the chamber and we didn't actually do a roll call then or take a named vote. We would have only have done that if it was requested for a recorded vote. So it is permissible to use the hands up function, but I have to make sure that we do it properly and that everybody puts their hands down when we ask you to put them down, etc., etc. So we just need to be very careful that you make sure you listen to what you're voting for and that you lower your hand when we ask you to lower your hand. So it is permissible in procedural terms.
Okay, I'm going to bring in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Fitter, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just going to endorse that excellent, splendid suggestion. It's no different to what we do at full council. We put our hand up, and I think it would certainly lighten the load for the monitoring officer and certainly yourself, Madam Chairman. So I certainly endorse it. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. So at the moment I've heard endorsements but no objections. The monitoring officer has confirmed that procedurally it is fine to do so. So I'm going to go to the vote. I don't see any other.
You've got a
Sorry?
phone in, man.
The phone-in members. We will.
I
will ask the monitoring officer to confirm with the councillors who are phoning in, and they are the only people who then will need to give their vote via the phone. So we are now going to go to the vote. Sorry, they are the only people who are going to give their vote verbally. So we're going to go to the vote. This is on agenda item number 10.1, which is the composition in terms of reference of the Standards Committee. The recommendation is set out on page 151 of your agenda pack. Could you please raise your hands if you are in favour of this? So currently I'm seeing 68 members in favour, 84 and rising. Oh, I haven't put my own hand up. I shall raise my hand as well. So we now have 91 people with their hands raised. Monitoring officer, could I bring you in to confirm that there are 91 people with their hands raised? 92 now.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that there are 94 people voting in favour of this item and therefore the recommendation is carried.
Thank you very much, monitoring officer. Councillors, if you could all please lower your hands now. Thank you. I'm just going to give it a minute or two for people to lower their hands. And meanwhile, we are going to go into agenda item number 10.2. This is a review of the scheme of delegation. Prior to moving to the debate, I just would like to point out there is a slight error on page 171 of your papers. The reference to county farms should not read county farms, it should read instead Cornwall Council Farms Estate. So I'm going to go to Councillor Pollard to move this and Councillor Eddy to second the recommendations. You'll find them on page 163 of your agenda pack. Councillor Pollard, please.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. As you say, the recommendations, there's a very simple, straightforward recommendation on page 163 of your papers, and I'm very happy to propose it to full council. In this case, there was a full review of the scheme of delegation in 2018. So the proposals here are minor amendments that are designed to clarify and fully codify the details of the scheme of delegation. I'd like to record our thanks, please, to the lawyer, senior governance lawyer, Leah Musto-Shinton, who's undertaken an exhaustive review, working with each and every directorate to ensure that the regulations are clear and accurate. To assure council there are no changes to the levels of delegation, and once approved, part of this will have to go to the leader to be asked for him to approve any changes to executive functions. But I'm very happy to propose a recommendation as laid out.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you, councillors. Councillors, does anybody have a question regarding this? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to pop an X in the box. I can't see any X's currently. No questions, so I'm presuming, Councillor Pollard, that you don't need to sum up, and I think I'm just going to go straight to the vote. Councillors, as we did just now, please could you raise your hands if you are in favour of this. This is on page 163 of your agenda pack. We are voting on the review of the scheme of delegation. Please raise your hands if you are in favour. Monitoring officer, can I ask you to come in and check with the councillors who are on the phone to see how they are voting?
Yes, certainly. Councillor Flashman, please can you confirm your vote? Thank you. And Councillor Tudor, I think you're back on the meeting, but I just want to make sure that's the case. No response from Councillor Tudor, Chairman. So those were the two that I was aware that were on the phone. Taking those votes for you, Chair.
Thank you. And whilst you're there, monitoring officer, at the moment I can see 90 hands raised, 91.
So I can confirm that at this point in time we have 90. That's interesting, went down and up. We have 93 votes in, which means that recommendation is carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much, councillors. If you could now please lower your hands. Thank you. Just going to give a little bit of time to watch those hands lower. And whilst you're lowering them, I'm going to advise you that we're moving on to the next item on the agenda. It's number 11.1, and that is the Port and Harbour budgets for 2021-2022. I'm going to invite Councillor Rich to move this, and then Councillor Jeff Brown to second the recommendations. You'll find them, councillors, set out on page 179 of your agenda pack. Councillor Rich.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Really happy to move the Harbour's budgets for 2021 to 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Councillor Jeff Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to second and to pay tribute to the hard work of the Harbour's team and our Marine Manager.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. I see Councillor Alvey has a question. Could I bring in Councillor Alvey, please?
Thank you, Chair, and I can confirm I will be supporting this come to the vote, but in considering the budget, Councillor Rich, what consideration has the Harbours Board given to the impact of the pandemic on particularly the pleasure boat industry, which is clearly a vital part of Cornwall's tourist officer, in particularly in the Falmouth area, which obviously is nearest to my division. You may actually question why I'm asking this question. Well, actually, the head office of Foul River Cornwall is actually within my division, down by the King Harry Slipway there. In particular, for example, has the board considered any form of holiday or support around mooring fees and landing fees? I just want to be clear in understanding really what support has come forward from the Harbours Board to ensure that these iconic businesses that are vital to Cornwall are able to trade again come the summer and spring of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you come in, Councillor Rich, Councillor Harris also has a question. Could I bring Councillor Harris, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of, well, it's the same question really. The budgets for both Penryn and Truro come out to a net zero, but in both cases, only after an item of expenditure in relation to Penryn of recharges of £34,000 and on Truro recharges of £205,000, and they just strike me as being balancing figures almost to bring it out to zero. So I wonder specifically what those recharges are. Thank you.
Councillors, does anybody else have a question, please? If so, now is the time to pop an X in the box. Councillor Rich, I can't see any further questions, so if you could respond to those, please. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, councillors, for your questions. I'll answer Councillor Alvey first. Yeah, I mean, this is very much a pandemic in mind budget. We are looking forward. I mean, this is obviously for next year, and I think it's mainly in terms of staffing. A lot of the impact of the pandemic on our operations is mostly to do with staffing. From an operational point of view, obviously for obvious reasons, we can't have people working too closely together. So, for example, in the Harbour office, we're having to get people in and out on various shifts, and they're in different bubbles. They are all key essential workers as well, so the work that they're doing is deemed essential by the council and the government. Obviously, some people are working from home where they can. You did ask me about, and Newquay is another example where we've actually had to have some extra cover because people have been taking more holidays in the UK last year. So we've had problems in the ports. We've had too many people getting in the way of all sorts of operations, lots of safety issues. So we've had to increase our staffing levels, and we're not necessarily expecting it to continue. We're hoping it doesn't continue like this, but as a contingency, our budget for next year is basically to try and maintain that level of staffing, that level of expenditure based on those pandemic issues. You did ask a question, Councillor Alvey, about fees and charges, which is actually the next part of the, it's actually not in this recommendation, it's the next one. But I'm happy to just to quickly say, yes, we've been discussing a lot of that. I'm happy to come back to it in the next bit. That might be more appropriate. With regards to Councillor David Harris, the recharges, that is the reason why Truro is so high is because basically that's where all of our staffing is and all the rest of it. And most of the recharging is just to do with the fact that we recharge with Cornwall Council for legal and everything else. And I think for convenience that we put that under Truro. So we're not intentionally trying to get things down to zero for the sake of it.
That makes sense. So Councillor Alvey, I think your point, Councillor Rich will return to that in the next item on the agenda. I don't think there are other councillors with questions. Councillors, I'm going to ask you again, do you feel able to vote by this using the raise hands function? If anybody has an objection to that, please raise your hand now. If you object to using the raise hands function. I'm going to give it a few seconds. No, good. So we're going to go to the vote on this. Mel, I don't need to call you in to do a roll call. We're going to vote on this by using the raise the hands function. So this is for item agenda 11.1. Councillors, please could you raise your hands if you are in favour of the recommendation as set out on page 179 of your agenda pack relating to the Port and Harbour budgets for 2021 and 2022. Monitoring officer, if I could bring you in, please. We're getting up to quite a few hands raised. Yeah, and I invite you to have a chat with Councillor Flashman on the phone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Councillor Flashman, can you just confirm your vote, please?
Yeah, support.
Thank you. And I assume Councillor Taylor's still not on the phone. Councillor Tudor, apologies, not Taylor. No, Chairman. So looking at the votes as it currently stands, so on my system we're showing up to 87 votes. So therefore that recommendation as set out in the report is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. If you could lower your hands now, please. Thank you, to make sure there's no, to make sure things are clear. Right, so we're going to move on to agenda item 11.2, which is fees and charges, ports and harbours 2021-2022. And Councillor Jeff Brown, right at the beginning, way back this morning, it feels like a long time ago, did declare an interest in 11.2. So he has confirmed in the sidebar that he is leaving the meeting. So the fees and charges, ports and harbours 2021-2022. I'm going to ask Councillor Rich to move this, and because Councillor Jeff Brown has left the meeting, Councillor Nolan will second these recommendations. You'll find them, councillors, on pages 191 and 192. So over to you, Councillor Rich.
Yes, thank you thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to move this. These are fees and charges for the year going forward, and happy to answer Councillor Alvey's question in a minute, and whoever else might want to ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan, please, to second.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second those.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. So, Councillor Alvey, perhaps you would like to come and make sure that your question is answered.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate my earlier questions sort of transcended the two topics, because one was around the principle and now we're on to the specifics of the shillings and pence. So really the same question is in setting the charges this year, what particular care was taken in ensuring the continued viability of our pleasure boat fleet, and as I say, for example, last year the enterprise boats that provide a ferry service as well as being a pleasure boat, provide a ferry service between Truro and Falmouth. They couldn't trade. Those boats were actually up for sale at distressed prices as a result of that. I believe they're hoping to be able to run the service still in 2021, but that's just one example of how we could have lost that iconic ferry service that has operated between Truro and Falmouth certainly since I was in short trousers.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Alvey, yeah, I agree. It is an iconic, really, the Truro to Falmouth ferry. It's a brilliant, not just for the tourists, really, for locals as well. Really enjoy that ferry service, and obviously this pandemic has created a huge amount of problems for the maritime industry in Cornwall, and I'm acutely aware of that. I've been working all summer with various boat owners, not just fishermen, people who run pleasure boats, as Councillor Alvey has indicated, and it's been a real headache for a lot of people. It's been very frustrating, and people have had to endure catastrophic situations with their businesses. Extremely hard-working people with viable businesses have suffered greatly. It's been taken a very terrible toll on our industry, and obviously as a harbour authority, we want all of our businesses. We want our fishermen. We want our pleasure boats. We want our leisure users. We want everybody's businesses to be functioning and viable, because obviously at the end of the day, they pay the fees, they pay the charges, the mooring fees, they pay for the permits, the licenses, and all of those things come to us as a harbour authority, and that allows us to spend money on keeping the harbour safe, on paying our harbour masters, on making sure that we're complying with the environmental regulations to protect our wildlife. All of these things, it's a circular economy, and so when as a board, we've set these fees and charges hugely with that in mind. It's very, very difficult balance to strike. If we don't charge sufficiently to our harbour users, we cannot afford, or we are unable to run a safe harbour. We are unable to comply with very important legal obligations. So just very, very quickly, we have done discounts. We have reduced mooring fees. Fishermen have had a 1% discount on the increase, which is 2.8 RPI. Generally speaking, across the board, that's the retail price index. And fishermen have had a discount, and we are always able to provide, to have conversations with individual businesses who are experiencing problems. We do have various payment plans that we can put in place, all sorts of things, and people can always contact me directly as well, Madam Chairman. I hope that reassures Martin Alvey. I believe we are doing all we can for our harbour users.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Grand. It sounds like you've been reassured, Councillor Alvey. So before I say anything else, I just want to confirm that at the moment there are no hands raised. And I can't see any questions at all in the box. So we are going to go to the vote. And again, this will be a vote by the show, raising your hands, the function on your computer screen. So councillors, could I ask you to raise your hand if you are in favour of the recommendations as set out on pages 191 and 192 regarding the fees and charges for the Ports and Harbours 2021 to 2022. So far I can see, yes, Mel, if you could.
Yeah, Councillor Flashman, please can you confirm your vote?
Support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairman, just in terms of the vote on this item, I will just pause for 1 second because we've got a little bit of movement before I confirm the final figure. So closing the vote now, Chairman, we have 87 members in support of that vote, and therefore those recommendations are carried as per the paper.
Thank you very much, Mel. And so, councillors, if you could now lower your hand, please. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move on now to agenda item number 12, which is motions. It's important for members to be aware that under Procedure Rule 12.3, any motions that have been moved and seconded stand referred to the relevant committee unless I exercise my discretion to allow the motion to be dealt with at the meeting at which it is brought forward, or it is considered to be convenient and conducive to the dispatch of business. And I will confirm my decision on each of the motions at the relevant point in the agenda. But today we only have just the one motion that will be on agenda item number 12.1. And this is a motion regarding the provision of insurance cover for road traffic accidents caused by medical episodes. So, councillors, in accordance with the Constitution, I am referring this motion to the Cabinet due to its potential legal and financial implications. And Councillor Edgerton, who has magically appeared on my screen, as the proposer of the motion, you now have 2 minutes to present the context. Over to you, please, Councillor Edgerton.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. All motor vehicles on UK roads must be insured for third-party liability to cover negligent acts by the driver. However, if the driver suffers a medical episode that was not reasonably foreseeable, or some other unusual event, such as a swarm of bees flying into the car, and as a result of that episode, the vehicle crashes and causes damage or injury to third parties, the driver is not liable in law because the accident was not caused by their negligence. This defence against claims is known in law as automatism. Insurance companies have used this defence in order to avoid paying out. The occasions on which such accidents happen and this defence are deployed are fortunately rare, but when they do occur, the consequences for innocent bystanders can be very serious. In November 2019, a school bus taking children to Roseland College crashed through the garden wall of a local resident on the A3078 near Tregony after the driver suffered a heart attack. The wall was demolished. The coach operator's insurance company refused to pay compensation to the homeowner using this defence of automatism. Fortunately, none of the children on the bus were injured, but if the heart attack had occurred 30 seconds later on the steep downhill road into Tregony, the consequences could have been catastrophic, with serious injuries or even fatalities. Again, the defence of automatism would have applied and no compensation would have been payable. I believe that the Council has a moral duty to ensure that its insurance policies and those of other companies operating on Council business should be extended to cover damage and injury caused by these unusual events. My motion asks that Cabinet looks at this issue and finds a way to make sure that the Council and its contractors are covered against a potentially dreadful incident happening in the future. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I hadn't unmuted myself. Thank you, Councillor Edgerton, and thank you for raising this very, very important topic, and it will be referred to Cabinet. I'm sure that they will debate it thoroughly. So we are now moving on then, councillors, to item agenda number 13, and that is questions from members to members of the Cabinet. So members will be aware that the Council agreed that a period of 60 minutes be allocated for questions from members to the Cabinet. Members are not required to give advance notice of their questions. Please, as we have been doing today, pop an X in the box if you have a question that you wish to ask, so that my Vice Chairman, Councillor Mary May, can make a note of your names. Each member must identify which Cabinet member their question is for, and they will be able to ask one supplementary question based on their original question or on the response. I would ask that questions and responses are kept as brief as possible, so that as many members as possible have the opportunity to ask their questions. Members may only put a second question if all members who wish to have had the opportunity to put their first question. I would also appreciate it if, as far as possible, members refrain from asking parochial questions, as these can be dealt with more appropriately outside of the meeting. So any questions that cannot be dealt with during the 60 minutes can, of course, be raised with a Cabinet member outside of the meeting. So Councillor May, could I bring you in to let us know who the first, so let's say who the first 5 councillors are with questions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Olivier, Harris, Elliott, Jenkin, Prater.
Lovely. Councillors Olivier, Harris, Elliott, Jenkin and Craker. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Olivier first, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Jeff Brown. It goes back to a subject I raised when circumstances were considerably different, about the fact that we have a large free car park at County Hall, which I suggest contradicts in both spirit and practicality our climate emergency declaration. Now, when I first raised this subject, Councillor Brown said there was a transport plan being developed by the council, and the car parking facilities and the park and ride, which we don't use very much as a council, would be part of that. So I'd like to know what progress has been made on getting rid of free car parking at County Hall, with all due allowance for certain work circumstances, which would make, where there are practical needs to use a car and the car park. So what progress has been made on getting rid of the car park and pushing both councillors and council officers, council staff, into using the park and ride and public transport?
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Olivier, for your question. You're absolutely right. There is a large free car park at County Hall, and I'm delighted to say that there's now 133 free car parks that Cornwall Council own across Cornwall for the duration of this 3rd lockdown, which is really good. But more seriously, with regards to your question, the whole issue when you raised it is part of the strategic review of traffic management in and across Truro. It is dependent on the situation with Pydar and the loss of the car park there, which needs to be included in it, and that is work in progress.
Supplementary, Councillor Olivier?
Yeah, I do feel obliged to ask the supplementary, as that is really more or less the answer I got the first time I asked, though there has been a pandemic since then. I understand, working practice is going to change permanently, but would he agree with me that maintaining a free car park at County Hall, plus, which encourages low use of the park and rides, is actually something that goes against our declaration of climate emergency? And if we're going to stick to that declaration, we need to stop providing that free car parking with certain exceptions.
Well, I wouldn't preempt the decision of the review, but I can see that we need to consider all areas across Truro, not just the council car park, but all the car parks in Truro, the park and ride, and also consider the provision being provided by private car parks in the city as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Olivier. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Harris next, please.
Thank you, Chair. This question, I think, is for the Deputy Leader. It's a finance question. This council spent nearly £20 million on consultants in the last financial year, £17 million in 2018-19, and a measly £9 million in 2017-18. Were you aware of the size of these figures? How can they be justified? And it's interesting, it's not as if this was to replace highly paid staff, because looking at the council's accounts, expenditure on staff earning more than £50,000 a year went up from £12 million in 2017-18 to £15 million in 2019-20. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Painter.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Harris. Yes, I was aware of those figures and and how they have gone up, and clearly they change depending on what work we're doing at that time. I don't really know what else your question was, apart from, yes, I was aware of those figures and where they are in our accounts.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Harris?
Yes, please. Could members be provided with an analysis of its expenditure, at least for 2019-20? And in particular, and this is a key point, I think, how much of this expenditure has been capitalised into projects such as Langarth or Pydar, so that it doesn't go through the council's revenue account, but instead is lumped into the total cost of a project in the hope that it can be recovered at some time in the future. Noting, of course, that if it can't be recovered, it will hit the council's revenue account at some time in the future, and monies to cover these amounts have to be found from the pockets of Cornish ratepayers.
And we're happy to supply the. Thank you, Madam Chairman. We're happy to supply those details to all councillors. Clearly, when we're doing some of these large projects, it clearly makes sense to use some of the short-term work from experts in getting these projects up and running, rather than employing somebody full-time just to do a very short period of work. So we'll get that information and happy to share it with councillors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Painter. I'm moving on now to Councillor Elliott, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. Another question for Councillor Brown. On the 11th of January, a decision of the leader was published regarding funding for holiday food for children entitled Free School Meals. Point 1.4 of the executive summary states that over 650,000 of central government COVID winter grant will be allocated to this in the Christmas and February half term, as schools were fully aware. I was somewhat surprised, therefore, to hear Councillor Brown in a radio interview state that the government were not funding free school meals in holidays, and Cornwall Council would have to, quote it, find it from somewhere. This statement obviously contradicts the leader's decision, which was published to us and was reiterated on Cornwall Council's Twitter feed, which really should be politically neutral. So I'd ask for clarity. Where is the funding coming from for this February half term?
I'm going to bring in, I realise you indicated for Councillor Jeff Brown, Councillor Elliott, but I'm going to bring in Councillor Sally Hawkin on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think as it's an area that, as Councillor Elliott is aware, is very close to my heart and one that I've spent a lot of time on, I think it's appropriate I do answer here. I think it's very clear that two things are true. The Department for Education chose not to fund free school meals during the holidays, but the half-term holiday, February half-term holiday, and that the COVID winter grant scheme was a possible option for how we might fund it. If you look at the guidance on the COVID winter grant scheme, you will see it does not direct you to spend it on free school meals provision. The council has chosen to do so. So I think that all the statements the council has made in the public domain are factually correct.
Councillor Elliott, do you have a supplementary question?
I think when you read the guidance and the other comments, it was clear of the intention of the money, because schools are not expected to be open in the holidays organising free school meals. They are closed, and contrary to the press, they haven't been closed in term time. So I just think it's a disappointing way of trying to put a political slant on it. The funding was given to provide meals for those people in need during the holidays, and schools are given the money to provide them in term time, actually uplifted by around £3.50 per week to ensure that they can either provide the vouchers or food boxes and so on. So I just think it was a disappointingly political slant, especially given the way that this council has unanimously supported efforts such as that of Cornelius Olivier to emphasise how important we find free school meals, and to try and partisan it, I think was a bit of a pity, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Do you wish to come back, Councillor Hawking?
So, I mean, yes, I'm always disappointed when people are playing politics with children and for children's food. I think if we go back to a quite controversial debate in Parliament around funding of free school meals, we would perhaps see this sort of genesis of the COVID winter grant scheme. So our MPs, ministers were very clear that they wanted to put a line between what they saw as need and the free school meals cohort, and they wanted to make sure that we responded to need, and that might not necessarily be a crossover to free school meals. And that was their justification why they didn't vote for free school meals funding in Parliament. So I think that the issue you raise comes from somewhere else other than our confusion about the project. But I think it's clear now that we're all on the same page, that children will be fed at half term, which is what we all want.
Jim Flashman here. Could I have a question, please?
Good point. Jim Flashman, I've just heard you saying that you would like to have a question. You're not able to access the chat box, so I will add you onto the list of people who are councillors who are going to give a question. Thank you, Councillor Flashman. And I've seen that Councillor Jeff Brown put his hand up. Did you wish to respond to Councillor Elliott's point that you raised?
If I may, Chairman, first of all to say that I'm quite surprised that I was accused of making a political point. It must be the first time in the 10 years that I've been on Cornwall Council that I've been accused of being political. It was a question that was asked to me as an aside issue from a transport issue I was talking about on radio, and I made the point that the priority was that the children get fed. I didn't really care where the money came from, but certainly at half term we were going to find the money from within Cornwall Council.
Thank you. I'm going to move on then to Councillor Loveday Jenkin, who has a question. Councillor Jenkin.
All right, thank you. It's a question for the leader, and if you'll forgive me, I'll speak in Cornish first and then translate. Han hembrinkinsi yn bys o tos the gyrnal in Mismethefan, fatlil yn ei disgweddus ag yn gnas a gonisogaeth a cehennydd di baro ddedda a the media. With the leaders of the world coming to Cornwall in June, how are we going to show off our nature and culture and environment, to special nature, culture and environment, to them and to the media?
And show off our Cornish language, Councillor Jenkin. Councillor Jim, over to you.
Indeed, Miraz Braz. Thank you, Councillor Jenkin. I don't know is the answer at this point in time, but we're absolutely committed to doing those things. So to be hosting G7 in Cornwall, we absolutely need to make the most of the opportunity to show off our language, our culture, our heritage, and all of the other great things that we're doing in Cornwall. We had a closed member briefing on the environmental growth strategy last Friday, where we heard the Chief Executive of the Cornwall Wildlife Trust talk about how much more we're doing in Cornwall to combat the ecological crisis, and how much more support she has as the Wildlife Trust and other wildlife trusts around the country. So we've got to shout about, but more than that, it's an opportunity for us to work with government on our combined ambitions of building back better and creating a greener, cleaner, fairer, more inclusive Cornwall. So those will be negotiations that we'll be having over the coming days and weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins, do you have a supplementary?
Marnus Olivero Muraz Grenny Gillen Warbath. Yeah, just to say thank you and let's do it together.
Gillen Warbath. Thank you. So moving on to Councillor Crakers, the last one in this group of 5 before we move on to the next group. Councillor Craker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a question for Councillor Brown regarding car parking charges in Cornwall Council car parks. I was very pleased to hear that the decision was made to suspend parking charges in the car parks across the county during the latest lockdown. But this is something which many have been asking for some time, particularly during the Christmas period. I know some free parking is given, but I think it was only around a day to each town. So my question is, when the latest lockdown comes to an end, please will the portfolio holder give serious consideration to allowing that free parking to continue for a period of time to aid the recovery, rather than sort of ending it on day one as what seemed to happen last time. And that recovery period is really vital, and anything we can do to support our market towns who request free parking in those areas to support their high streets would be incredibly welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Craig, for your question. The intention is that the free parking will continue until the end of lockdown, and the purpose of the free parking obviously isn't to encourage people at the moment to drive into town to shop, because that's impractical and most shops are closed anyway, except for those that are providing essential services. The intention is to enable people in areas, particularly where there is difficulty in on-street parking, to park their vehicles up without fear of charging or penalty notices, stay home and stay safe. At the moment, once lockdown ceases, we'll reintroduce parking charges because it's a way of helping to manage traffic flows around the towns.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Craig?
Just very briefly, Madam Chairman, thank you. The question really was about the recovery and after the latest lockdown. So I appreciate what the intention is at the moment, that as soon as the lockdown ends, charges will be reinstated. But for those towns, particularly those market towns that make the request for some free parking for a limited period of time after the lockdown, to encourage people to come back into the towns. We were hearing last time of vulnerable people feeling almost frightened to come in and touch the car parking paying machines. I know there's the option to pay on their phone, but not everybody can access that. So just for some consideration for you, Councillor Brown, after the lockdown ends, for those towns that request it, please consider those requests. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I absolutely consider it, but I would also draw members' attentions to the batch purchases that are now available to residents, which significantly reduce parking charges, and I would really encourage residents who use their car parks regularly to take advantage of that.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Councillor Mary May for the next set of councillors. Mary, if you could bear in mind that Councillor Flashman also wishes to raise a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've added Councillor Flashman to the list. We've 8 speakers, but the next 5 are Councillor Toms, Bitter, Kirkham, Rich and Wood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So Councillor Toms first then, please.
Good day, Madam Chairman. Nice to see you all today. My question is to Councillor Painter. I've noticed that a couple of individual decisions have come through lately about the sale of properties from the council's portfolio. I haven't read the statements that fall in behind these. It shows that some of these are have not been maintained properly and in disrepair, and the cost of the repair will be significant. Can I be assured that this is not common across our estate, and that something will be done to make sure that we're not losing properties and not keeping the income that could be derived from them? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm just going to wait. Which cabinet member is best placed to answer that, please? Councillor Toms, could you remind me who you directed the question at? Sorry. Councillor Chairman.
Well, it was directed at Councillor Painter.
Yeah.
Councillor Painter.
Or Councillor Yvonne Gibbons might want to respond.
Councillor Painter is on my screen now, so perhaps Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We can certainly get information to Councillor Toms about any of those individual decisions that we've made, and clearly if there are transfers of assets, sorry if I heard that correctly, I'm just picking up my children from school. If I heard that correctly, then if there are any sort of liabilities, then that would obviously have been considered at the time. I don't know if that covers Councillor Tom's question or if he has a supplementary and I can hear a bit more.
Just as a supplementary to that question is the fact that one of these sites we derive an income from. It's now been sold. That income will go to the new owner, and it's because of the lack of maintenance of that property that we've lost that income to the council. And income means that we've got revenue that we can spend on all sorts of things, and that's my worry. And it's not happened once lately, it's happened twice, and I will send you the 2 instances and show you what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Toms. Yeah, happy to have a look at that and see what's happened. I know there is maintenance backlog, which you know, on a lot of our properties because of the massive cuts in government funding over the last 10 years. So we will certainly have a look, and I'll look at those particular instances to see what we can do. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you both of you. So I'm going to move now to Councillor Fitter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a question for the leader. I'm not quite sure if the leader is still with us. Yes. It's a question for the leader. Leader, there's been many of the airports are pressing for a relaxation and a cancellation of the airport and the air passenger duty. Now, this was introduced to help to address the climate change agenda. And given I'm fully aware of the problems that Cornwall Council have with the deficit at Cornwall Airport, Newquay, but I sincerely hope that you will not be supporting this campaign as it really is a backdoor method of reducing ticket prices to airline, and it's nothing to do with, in actual fact, dealing with the debts that the airport itself has. And I wonder if you could indicate your stand on it.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Fitter, for your question. I'm not aware of the council having taken a position on this. I understand your concerns around it, so I'll raise that with Cornwall Airport, Newquay, and portfolio holder Jeff Brown, and come to a position on it. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you. If I may come back to you, Leader, it's only my attention was drawn to it because I heard of an interview given by a Corsair director pressing for the lifting of the airport duty, and I feel that it's probably contrary to our Cornwall Council policy as addressing the climate change agenda. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Fitter, thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you. So Councillor Kirkham next. I think your question is for Councillor Sally Hawking. Councillor Kirkham.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. A number of questions about the pandemic and schools and nurseries. The first one is I've been collecting computers and laptops for schools in Falmouth, as I know some other councillors have been doing. I wondered if Councillor Hawking had any numbers. I know that some numbers were given out by the council, I think it was a week or so ago, about the numbers of children in schools. And they were about 4 times the amount they were in the last lockdown. I wonder if there was any update on that, because it does seem to be locally. I thought it would drop, but it hasn't, and I wondered if she had found that too. And I understand that because of the lack of equipment, and because also that the mobile data scheme is so difficult to access and so fiddly for schools to do, that a lot of children may be coming in because they don't have internet access at home. So I wondered if she had any information about that. And the other question was about nurseries. There is a lot of worry about nurseries who have been told they have to stay open, but are losing money because some children are being kept out because of lockdown. And I wondered if she had any figures or concerns about nurseries in Cornwall and how badly they are being affected by this, and if there is anything that we could do about it.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkham. Councillor Hawking.
Thank you. Quite a lot of different bits there, so I'm happy to do an update for all councillors I can send around the school situation in terms of the laptops, because there's been quite a lot of council activity on that. It's very welcome where councillors have linked in with their specific schools and made arrangements there. I think we've issued press releases to suggest that people who want to help out can link with their local secondary school, because that's the place that usually has the capacity and the technical know-how to do whatever you need to do to clean and wipe computers. It's certainly not the case that anything and everything that people might have that's available at home would potentially be useful to be repurposed. So it's definitely an intelligent conversation with local schools. I know that in my local area that the secondary school said that they were meeting need, but that perhaps the need came in the primary sector in the early years. It's definitely something that we're trying to manage and help with. Some people might have heard me say last week that the COVID fines money that had come to the council was being used for laptops, in part to be cleaning some of the council's own laptops that are surplus and to be able to be repurposed, and in part to be purchasing more equipment. So there's quite a lot of activity in this area, and happy to update all councillors on that. In terms of, I think our laptop shortage looks to be in the range of 200, which is something we're looking to manage, and we can see whether there is extra support that might be needed and be helpful for councillors to be engaging with. I will also get you an update on the latest figures as far as school attendance. Certainly there's a range of different reasons why people might be accessing school. It wouldn't necessarily all be about that relaxing of the rules, so that if you don't have kit, you can come into school, because there's issues there as well around critical workers. So we have also appealed to people where they are where they are designated as a critical worker but don't perhaps need to take that up because they're able to work from home, to be able to do that. There was a bit there about nurseries. Certainly we do also have some information around nurseries and early years that we would like to circulate to all members, because I know you highlighted earlier a piece that appeared in the local media. It is not one that I would recognise as being the position. So I think that absolutely is a sector that often is overlooked, and I don't want that to be the case, and I want them to be part of the conversations around testing, around all their needs. But early years sector, the piece that appeared in the local paper is not one that that fully reflects the position. We do have some challenges. Prior to the announcement of the current lockdown, the government had said that early years funding would return to normal arrangements for the spring term of 2021. And there's some very specific things that probably is too long for me to go through now, where there are some issues with how they are asking people to calculate who's in their school, because the restrictions do allow for early years settings to remain open, but the reality is providers have seen families choosing to keep children at home, so attendance was reduced. In some cases, they've got requirements on the staff to shield or self-isolate, and that's meant provision has need to be restricted. So if the funding arrangements were applied as the Department for Education have indicated, reduced attendance would have an impact on the funding allocated to providers. So at this point, we have asked providers to submit claims based on actual attendance in order to confirm their final funding for the spring term. We've asked them to claim for all funded children on roll, even if parents are keeping children at home. We know that several authorities have taken this approach, and we're awaiting confirmation from the Department for Education that that is reasonable as a way of trying to manage this situation. Again, I'm happy to provide further detail for all councillors on that quite technical matter.
So you've asked the government basically to confirm they'll keep funding those places even if the kids are pulled out because of lockdown?
We've asked for for providers to count all children who are on roll, yes.
And just one other supplementary, you said you were 200 computers short. Is that just local authority schools, or is that the academies as well in Cornwall?
We don't tend to recognise local authority schools. You know, when we're looking at all the things we need to do for schools, we look at all schools.
Cornwall as a whole.
We don't distinguish like that, because we need to meet the needs of everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a supplementary on that? Is that secondary schools or primary schools?
I don't have that detail, but I'm happy to provide more information to all councillors.
Lovely, thank you. Grand. So Councillor Rich looks like he wanted to ask a question, but he's withdrawn it. I hope that's correct, my understanding of that. So I'm going to go on to Councillor Wood next, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My question is for Edwina Hannaford. First, I'd like to congratulate her on the fact that we're going to get 500 homes installed with solar panels, which will help low-income families crawl their way out of fuel poverty. I wanted to ask is, as part of the scheme, are they going to install the solar boost facility, which actually diverts the electricity away from the solar panels when it's not needed, and instead of going to the grid, it goes into the person's hot water system. This gives them free hot water. I've done it with my tenants. It works exceptionally well.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I believe Councillor Hannaford has sent in apologies for today's meeting, so the leader is here to respond to your question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Wood, for your question, and thank you for the opportunity to send on behalf of the whole council, Councillor Hannaford, our best wishes for her recuperation following the operation that she's had. So indeed, great news, Councillor Wood, and part of what we're doing to reduce carbon emissions in Cornwall. The boost facility sounds like a little bit of a technical question, so I'll make sure that we get a written response from technical officers on that. Thank you.
And my supplementary question, please, Chairman. Once we have got these panels installed, will we make the figures available to private landlords as well, to point out to them just how beneficial it is to put solar panels on tenants' properties, and also to lobby the government that private landlords can make them tax deductible, because this would be a huge incentive for people to install solar onto private properties for private landlords to put it and help so many people out of fuel poverty. I've done it, I know it works. Thank you.
Yeah, can you take that forward, Leader?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. There's lots of good data available on this already showing the benefits to landlords, so I'm happy for that to be shared. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back now to Councillor May for the next 5. Councillor May, I see that Councillor Dyer also has his hand raised, so if you could take that into account, please.
Yes, Chairman, I have. So the last 5 at the moment are Rogerson, Dyer, Flashman, Barnes and Moorcroft. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor May. So that was Councillors Rogerson, Dyer, Flashman and Moorcroft.
Barnes.
Barnes, in between Flashman and Moorcroft.
How could you miss Councillor Barnes?
I'm going to be in trouble now, aren't I? Councillor Rogerson.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the leader, please. Julian, in light of the fact that we're going to have some rather important international visitors this summer, and in light of the absolutely lovely prayers from the Bishop this morning, where he made children a priority and a focus, and in light of this Council's commitment to the rights of the child, may I ask you if there's any opportunity whatsoever to do everything in your power to encourage the planners and the organisers of the G7 event to include the voices of young people of the Duchy, and I guess of the country too, but especially the Duchy, in whichever way possible, please. Thank you.
Councillor German.
Thank you, Councillor Rogerson, for your question. Thank you for all of the hard work that you do on behalf of our young people. Absolutely, in interviews that I've been doing, responding to the announcement, I've talked about how important it is that this is an opportunity to inspire our young people, but also to get our young people in front of the world leaders and in front of the other important people that will be in those entourages, so that they can see that great things happen in Cornwall and that they can become those people that make great things happen. So really important that we take the opportunity to inspire our young people, and that will be part of the discussions that we're having with government. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. Music to my ears, Councillor Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer, please, can I invite you to put your question?
Reminding my incompetence with the
hand flag waving business. There is no question from me, thank you, ma'am.
It's still nice to hear your voice, Councillor Dyer.
You're very kind.
Councillor Flashman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. The questions to Councillor Jeff Brown, please.
Fire away.
I'm sort of going a little bit back on the agenda to 12.1, but it didn't cover the question that I wanted to ask. It's about road accidents where vehicles, either in the middle of the night or through the day when there's not much traffic around, career into hedges. They do an awful lot of damage, mainly more than a metre off the highway. The recovery vehicles arrive fairly quickly, remove the vehicle, so we've got no idea who the vehicle belongs to, no registration number, and unfortunately we've got no person to send a bill in to repair the repairs. Now, I've asked Highways on a few occasions to clean up the plastic and whatever, but it's often the main 1 metre distance from the highway. These are happening frequently along all the major routes that are fast stretches of road. Could we give you some guidance on that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Flashman. Councillor Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Flashman, for a very sensible question. I share your frustration. Very often we're unaware that vehicles have had accidents in the middle of the night, so we wouldn't be conscious of the damage they caused. My suggestion would be that you contact your local police inspector, who is probably the best source of any information relating to those accidents and may be able to assist with identifying the culprit.
Yeah, and I also got a supplementary question, if I may, Chairman.
Fire away.
Could you convey our deepest sympathy to Paul Allen for retiring? He's been one of the best divisional surveyors we've had in the East, and all the parish councils and all the people on the network committees convey our good wishes to him on his retirement. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Councillor Flashman, I don't think strictly that was a supplementary question, but I wholeheartedly agree with you that we will really miss Paul Allen. He's been an incredible officer, and I join you and I'm sure all the other councillors, including town and parish councils who have worked with him over the past years, to wish him all the best in his retirement and thank him for all his excellent work.
Yeah, thank you ever so much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Flashman. So, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes. Oh, got you.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is to the leader. My question is, will this council press the government that when Cornwall comes out of lockdown, that the government returns to setting a mileage limit on individuals' travel from their homes according to each tier, i.e. 5 miles for tier 4, 10 for tier 3, 15 for tier 2, and 20 for tier 1, and then it means we don't have to spread so many tiers around our A&E and critical care units.
Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes, for your question. It's an interesting question. I think at the moment, obviously we're in lockdown and the guidance is to stay local, and there's a lot of speculation around what local means, and we need to have some self-understanding and be able to justify to the police that we think what we're doing is local, rather than the police say to us, we don't think what you're doing is local. In terms of mileage limits, I think I'm not sure that mileage limits are the best thing, but I think more importantly about tiers and people moving around the country from one tier to another. And I think I would welcome where there are higher cases, the movement restrictions. So as we had in tier 4 previously, when people were supposed to stay at home, but there was a belief and I think we can evidence some of that through police action, that some people were moving out of those tier areas that they weren't supposed to be. So I think that's the more realistic route, that people who are in a high tier area, who are supposed to be staying at home, those have action taken against them if they do leave that area.
Councillor Barnes,
yeah, I have to come back on that, Chairman. That's a fudge saying nothing, really. This morning, when I wanted to watch the local news, someone in my home had altered the television to have the BBC National News on, and it cut to the London area, and they said that on the London section that London has lost 700,000 people from London, and obviously they've all gone to elsewhere, and mostly down here, I think. So I think you need to set standards which are clear and identified, and then we don't have so much problems coming down here. If you're just going to rely on goodwill, you might as well give up.
That's not what I said, Councillor Barnes. I think I was extremely clear that people in higher tier areas, in my view, and happy to have that discussion with government, to feed into government, should be staying at home if there is tiering in the future. So rather than saying it's 5 miles, which I do think really does create difficulties, some people in Cornwall live more than 5 miles away from their nearest shop. So we've got to be pragmatic about that. What I said was higher tier areas shouldn't be leaving home, and that would be, if Cornwall was a lower tier area, that people shouldn't be coming from those higher tier areas to Cornwall. I think that is very clear. Thank you.
I've got a supplementary, madam. My question is, how did Councillor John Wood glue his dog to the wall?
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. So we're going to move on. Councillor Moorcroft has a question. I'm going to invite Councillor Moorcroft onto the screen whilst he's opening up his camera and microphone. I'm just going to say, for the benefit of anybody watching on the live stream or the recording, that there is a message in the chat box here from Councillor Hawken that says there is some debate around the accuracy of the laptop numbers I gave just now, so I will circulate an accurate update position later with some more details. So that's just to around the number of laptops required in schools during the pandemic. Councillor Moorcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Oddly enough, I've just taken a phone call from a gentleman who runs a local children's nursery, and my question is to Councillor Hawken. He says that lateral flow tests have been supplied to schools, but not to children's nurseries, which the government have expressed a need and desire to remain open. Are you aware of any plans for them to be supplied? As obviously social distancing in nurseries is just simply not possible. Is that something you know about, please?
Councillor Hawken.
Yeah, so lateral flow testing in various ways for those different businesses, etc., is something that is actively being worked on. And yes, I've mentioned the earlier sector has been very much one where we need to be looking at to provide that support. So that's an ongoing issue in terms of the rollout across those other sectors, people who are in essential forms of work where regular testing would make lots of sense.
You were breaking up a little bit there, Councillor Hawken. Councillor Moorcroft, did you fully understand that? Do you want to come back?
I gathered it's an ongoing problem that's been looked into. Is that right?
No. So I agree completely with you. The early years sector have been, forgotten in that respect. Lots and lots of discussion about testing in schools, but absolutely that there is lots more moves afoot around a whole range of employers and people who are in the essential workforce to be able to get regular testing. So I would say early years were on that list of people that we need to work through in terms of how we make that a reality. As you can probably imagine, the mass testing is a lot easier to say than it is to do. So the schools have gone through a certain amount of training, and we need to look at how we'd be able to do that same thing for different sectors. But it's very much a live conversation to try and see if we can support the earlier sector in that way.
Lovely, thank you. It was a lot clearer that time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Moorcroft. Councillor May, could I bring you in again? I can see perhaps Councillor Pete Mitchell. Are there any other councillors who wish to add a question?
No, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Pete Mitchell, and I would also like to ask one. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. So Councillor Pete Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Henry. It's a question for Rob Rushell, if he's on this call. If not, first the Deputy Leader. I have a constituent parishioner who has a 93-year-old mother who was down here in the summer visiting and got locked down with the tears and everything and couldn't return to Wolverhampton. She, a few weeks ago, got the message from her surgery in Wolverhampton that the vaccine was there for her and could she come in and have it. It just seemed ridiculous for her to drive all the way back to, or be driven all the way back, sorry, to Wolverhampton to get the jab and then come back here. So she approached the local doctors, our local doctors in St Agnes, and they said they'd gladly give her the jab, but she'd have to be registered here. Fully registered, not the 10-day sort of thing or whatever it is. So which is what she's done, which means now that all her notes, and a 93-year-old will carry a lot of notes on paper, will have to be sent down here, which will take months. And then when she gets back to Wolverhampton, she will re-register with her doctor there. So it will all have to be sent back again. I would suspect that she's not the only one. I would suspect a lot of people who have second homes who have come down here, a lot of people perhaps on holiday who got locked down in here, will be asked to return to their place, almost biblically asked to return to their place of where the doctors are. Is there a way around this, Rob? I mean, why can't they just register for the 10 days and get the inoculation and then go home? This lady is dying to go home and she just wants the jab and then she's off, but it's going to cost the health service thousands and thousands over the country, if not millions, I would have thought. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins. Oh, Rob was there. Sorry, I saw Rob. You were there. Good.
Yes, indeed. Yes, all day long, Madam Chairman. All day long. Councillor Mitchell, thank you for your question. I think it's a question that we're interested in, but of course, as a local authority, the responsibility rests with the CCG. So whilst I don't have an answer in my pocket, I'm quite happy to take its situation up with the CCG, because in terms of the whole vaccination program, it rests with the health service. So, and this is just one aspect of it. And to be honest, we've got quite a range of questions around the whole vaccination program. So I'm quite happy to take this particular issue up directly with the CCG. And then what I'll do, if it's okay with you, I'll circulate the answer to all members, because I suspect that there are other people with other councils with similar issues in their patches, so it could apply equally across Cornwall. So if it's okay with you, I'll follow that up with the CCG, and then I'll formally write to you with an answer.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. You're looking very smart. Who got you ready?
Yes, I've had a bit of practice now, Pete. Thank you.
Grand. And Councillor May, the final questioner of today.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's for Councillor Mitchell, just a bit of an update, really. Recently, I've been notified that I could possibly have 7 properties purchased in Penryn, which I'm really pleased about, towards the temporary accommodation list. I've actually been notified that 1 is actually being secured. Could Councillor Mitchell give us an update on where we are in our numbers for temporary accommodation that has been acquired so far? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
Hello, Mary, everyone, and thank you for the question. I'm hoping that on a dull, wet, windy day, that the answer is a gleam of light for all members to be happy to get behind. There's good news on many fronts in the housing department, and our commitment to provide better accommodation and housing and more importantly homes for the people of Cornwall. And I'm glad that some of that provision is going to be in your division. So firstly, maybe not the exact question you've answered, but just to give an update as you've requested. As of this week, in the council's administration commitment for the 4 years to deliver 1,000 homes, we are at 997. And I think that's something that all of us, all members and all staff of Cornwall Council should be really proud of. It's an amazing achievement. And we have our own temporary accommodation issues, and the council made the very bold decision to come up with £40 million to purchase our own portfolio of temporary accommodation to convert the pretty average up until recent times 250, 260-ish families that find themselves in the terrible situation of needing a temporary accommodation, that we would purchase that number to provide housing which we know is of a decent standard, even on a temporary timescale. The lockdown, I'm sure, will not come as a surprise to any of you, has caused some issues. We did take too long to start getting up and running. We should have done it quicker, and my apologies for that, but we had got that all sorted. All the dominoes were up in place, and we saw a huge leap in the numbers that we were moving forward with, but that has been hit with the number of houses that are on the market, and also those people who have either removed them or will not allow viewings to take place, which is common sense. So we have, the last figure I had, we had around 50 that we'd actually purchased, and we had another 70 that were actually in the system, waiting for legals to be finalised and offers to be accepted. To be perfectly honest, with the way things are going, we're not going to hit that target of the temporary accommodation by the end of this administration, but the instruction to officers has been, wherever we've seen suitable accommodation that fits the criteria, is to basically go out and buy as much of it as possible. But the really good news is that we will deliver our commitment, and it's absolutely fantastic that 1,000 homes will have been provided by Cornwall Council over the last 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor May, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell, for the update, especially on the 1,000 homes. Do we have an aspiration in amongst the temporary accommodation, other than the 1-bedroom flat, 2 and 3 bedroom, for any 4 to 5 bedroom properties? Because in my area I have 2 families who are waiting for 4/5 bedroom properties.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks for the supplementary, Mary. So we do need to look at what need and requirements are out there and try and match that with our provision, whether that's temporary accommodation, new builds or whatever. I think both 1-bedroom, the pandemic has certainly shown that we are adrift on the numbers of 1-bedroom flats that we require here in Cornwall, and that will certainly be taken into account in all future projections. And you're absolutely right, Mary, at the other end as well, for 4 and 5 bedrooms, not quite needed as much, but they certainly are needed for families here in Cornwall. And we will be looking at what we can purchase, as I say, what's available, what need, but any portfolio should have all of the different bedroom numbers in its arsenal, because those people will require help, just as unfortunately anybody will. And you know, we look at what's happening in the country, and we do hope that the vaccinations will allow us to move forward and come out of this lockdown and not go into other ones quite so regularly as we would have to. But there are going to be a lot of people, unfortunately, laid off and for no reason or you know, not down to their own fault at all, who are going to find themselves in the need of temporary accommodation and full support from this council.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell, and thank you for one of the final comments in this council meeting, that gleam of hope. And I think Bishop Hugh this morning focused our minds on 3 areas, that was children and poverty and the environment. And I think that final set of questions really highlighted how we're working as a council towards all those 3 areas. So thank you very much. That brings to the close item agenda number 13. Item agenda number 14 is any other business that the chairman considers to be of urgency, and you'll be relieved to hear that there is no other business that I consider to be urgent enough to keep you here any longer than you already have stayed. So thank you very much, councillors, for your forbearance, for your excellent contributions today, and stay safe, stay cheerful. Goodbye.
And thank you, Matt.
Cheers, guys. All the best. Thank you, Hillary.
Well done, Hillary.
Bye all. Cheerio.
Goodbye, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Hillary. Well done. Excellent. Bye-bye, everyone.
Right on.